Why don't you tell me about your character, Conan?
Conan? Conan is the damnedest bastard there ever was. He's got a long black mane of hair, crystal blue eyes. He's a fighter, born on the battlefield. To him, combat's a way of life. It's all he's ever known, all he ever wants to know! He's no soldier who was taught to fight. To him, fight is an instinct. It's a part of him. Like his legs, his arms, his chest, his bull neck. Believe me, he don't take it from nobody. He'll fight man, beast, devil, or God. And when those women feel those tree trunk firm arms around their waist, they melt like butter on a hot skillet.
Hello there, fellow travelers, fellow adventurers, my sword brothers and sisters. I'm Tim from Secret Fire Books, and September is upon us, which means it is time for Cimmerian September, the fantastic reading event originally created by Michael K. Vaughn for his channel, which he graciously opened to the rest of us on YouTube for those who are interested in joining in. And if you don't know, the rules for Cimmerian September have generally always been the same. If you've never read any of the original Conan the Barbarian stories by Robert E. Howard, then read them. This is your month to catch up, to read the original Conan stories, and see what this whole Conan thing is about. But for those of us who are caught up, for those of us who have read Howard's original stories, this year we are going to be focusing on Conan pastiche. So any kind of novel, short story, comic book, or anything else that was created for the Conan character that was not created by Robert E. Howard. There's a lot of Conan-related stuff that I want to talk about this month on the channel. But first, we're going to talk about the first Conan pastiche that I read this month, and that was Conan the Invincible by Robert Jordan. Now, Robert Jordan, the famous and beloved author of the Wheel of Time series, wrote 7 Conan novels back in the 80s, one of which was the film novelization of Conan the Destroyer, which I actually will talk about at some point this month as well, because I want to talk about the Conan movies and their adaptations. But he wrote 6 other novels, some original stories, including Robert E. Howard's famous Conan character. And the first 3 of which were bound up in that awesome hardcover that I have on my shelf, The First Chronicles of Conan. And so I read the first volume in that big old book. I read Conan the Invincible, and I have some thoughts about it. So what's it about? Well, Conan the Invincible is a story of Conan in his youth. He's actually only 18 years old when this story takes place, so it's very early in his adventuring career. He's fresh out of Cimmeria. He's just now exploring the eastern reaches of the Hyborian Age kingdoms for the first time. He's still a lowly thief who's robbing from merchant houses and wizards' towers. Thoughts of ruling a kingdom and leading armies haven't even entered into his mind yet. So he's still just a young guy, fairly inexperienced, although the story does take place a short time after the Tower of the Elephant, the Robert E. Howard story, Tower of the Elephant. Conan himself makes multiple references to that story, and so it's a little nice bit of connective tissue there. But he's still fairly young, and he's still slumming around Shadowzar, the hive of scum and villainy that is Shadowzar, the capital of Zamora. And while he's in a tavern there, he's approached by a mysterious old man. Yes, we get that tried and true trope right off the bat. A mysterious old man, who totally isn't a wizard, by the way, approaches Conan and says, "Hey, Conan, I heard you're a great thief. I need you to steal something for me, and if you do, I will give you a ton of gold." And so Conan says, "Okay, I'm listening." And the guy tells him that recently the king of Zamora was given a lavish gift by a political ally of his. He was given 5 dancing girls to add to his seraglio, and with each girl came a priceless jeweled pendant. And so the old man, who once again totally isn't a wizard, needs Conan to break into the palace, steal these pendants, and give them to him, and he will be rewarded with a huge amount of gold if he does so. So Conan agrees, and that night he breaks into the palace and tries to find these pendants, and he finds one of them, and he also finds the dancing girl who possesses it. He accidentally wakes her up, and she's surprisingly okay with the fact that this random barbarian has just broken into her sleeping chamber. And she tells him, okay, you want the pendants? I can get you the pendants. Come back tomorrow night. I will have gathered up all the other pendants from the other girls, and I will give them to you. But in return, I want you to give me my freedom. I want you to get me out of here. I don't like being in this castle. I don't like being, one of the king's harem girls. Just get me out of here, give me my freedom, and I will give you the pendants. So Conan says, okay, sounds like a deal. We'll do that. I'll come back tomorrow. So he sneaks out of the palace, and not even an hour later, someone else breaks into the palace, kidnaps the girls, and takes the pendants with them. And now they are escaping into the desert, and so Conan has to track these people down and rescue the girls, thereby fulfilling his oath to this one girl, Veleta, and by setting her free, and also get the pendant so he can turn over to his patron, who, again, totally isn't a wizard.
Are you sure about that?
Conan soon learns that the kidnappers are actually henchmen of this powerful necromancer named Aminar, who has a secluded keep hidden in the mountains across the Zuagir Desert, and he has some maniacal purposes in mind for both the girls and the pendants. So Conan is racing after these kidnappers to get the girls and the pendants back, and all on the way, he ends up running afoul of the Red Hawk, this legendary female thief who is the leader of a big group of bandits, and they eventually become allies and team up together to take back this treasure and also rescue the dancing girls. Now, I am not necessarily a fan of Robert Jordan. I've never read his Wheel of Time series, even though it has been recommended to me many times. I'm just not a big epic fantasy guy. I'm not really into that subgenre. I was when I was younger, but I've really fallen out of love with it, and I've read less and less epic fantasy over the years. I'm really more of a sword and sorcery guy now. I do have a copy of Eye of the World, but I don't know if I'll ever get around to reading it, and I'll probably never get around to the rest of the series. So I got to apologize and say that if you guys were expecting me to cover Wheel of Time on this channel at some point, well, I'm sorry, but that's probably never going to happen. That said, I have been told time and time again that Robert Jordan is a great writer, and I definitely believe that now that I've read this book. The only other book of his that I had read was the aforementioned Conan the Destroyer novelization, which is not a good book by any means. It has a lot of problems. I won't blame Robert Jordan for those problems because it really is the script for the movie that it's based on. There's a lot of issues with the script, particularly the characters and the character interactions that made for kind of a lame novel. So I won't blame Robert Jordan for that. And besides, Conan the Invincible is a whole other story. I really, really enjoyed this book. Jordan is a very descriptive writer. He has a real knack for setting up a scene and an atmosphere that really immerses the reader. A character will walk into a room, and instead of immediately getting to what the character is doing in the room, he will describe what the character is seeing and hearing and smelling. He'll describe what's going on in the background, what the background characters are wearing, what they're doing. He'll describe a very vivid theatrical kind of scene that immerses the reader. And I was kind of surprised to see that in a Conan story, but I liked it quite a bit. It never overstayed its welcome. I never felt like I was being dragged around through descriptions that I didn't really care to know. I felt like they really did support the narrative that was going on. One of my favorite examples of this is a scene where a wizard is in his lair, and Jordan describes all the different spell books and potions and all the different magical accoutrements that this wizard has lying all over the place, and it created a really creepy, wizardy atmosphere that I really, really enjoyed. In this book, he was also very good at describing the action. Now, obviously, no one's ever going to write action in a Conan story like Robert E. Howard. There was just a real viscerality. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm using it. A real viscerality and intensity to his writing that made his action scenes so great. But Jordan does a really good job. Conan really does feel like this force of nature that can enter into a fight and just tear his way out of it with his bare hands if he must. That was the other thing. I think he does a really good job of writing Conan as a character. There are some writers of Conan pastiche that don't seem to get the Conan character. They don't really seem to understand where Robert E. Howard was going when he wrote those original stories, and they kind of mold Conan into something that he's not. But in this story, there was no time where I sat back and thought, man, this really isn't Conan, or Conan wouldn't do that. I think Robert Jordan definitely understands the character. I definitely felt like this was Conan. This is the kind of stuff he would be doing. This is the kind of adventure that he would have. So, yeah, I was very impressed by that. I think the novel was very well written, and I think he handled all of those Howardian concepts very well. Hey guys, before I get to the rest of the review, I wanted to let you know something really important. The Elusive Exclusive Book Society is going live. That's right, the next episode of Eves is going to be a live stream over on Pulp Mortem's channel, September 25th, 2:30 p.m. Central Time. We are jumping on a live stream to talk about Bumcider by C.C. McCapp. Yes, we're finally getting around to Bumcider. Jake from Pulp Mortem decided that this book was just way too much for him to handle on his own, so he's bringing me and Nick and all of you guys with him. So if you have a copy of Bumcider, make sure to read it, take some notes if you want, and show up to the live stream. Hang out, make some jokes, make fun of us if you want. I will also have Bryce from Shelf Centered. He's going to be our special guest for that stream, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what he thinks about Bumcider. I can't wait to see what you guys think about Bumcider. But first, I got to find out what I think about Bumcider, because I'm not even halfway through this book yet. So I need to get back to reading that, and you guys need to get back to Conan. I do have quite a few issues with this book, but I think that the sheer quality of Robert Jordan's writing really does make up for quite a bit of that. When this book is good, it is really, really good. And so I don't want any of the complaints I make to detract from that. I had a lot of fun reading this. I just think it does have some pretty glaring flaws that need to be addressed. And in order to give the book that due criticism, I need to actually talk about some spoilers. And so if you wanted to read Conan the Invincible for yourself and you didn't want to be spoiled, this is when you click off the video. If you want my non-spoiler thoughts, just know that I thought it was very well written. It just had a few glaring flaws in terms of story and character. The book's biggest problem, I think, is how it handles some of its characters and their storylines. Quite a few of these characters felt very tacked on, and some of their storylines really didn't go anywhere. The first one I want to bring up is the old man, the mysterious old man that Conan meets in the beginning, and he gives him this job of stealing these pendants. Turns out he was a wizard the whole time.
No way. No way.
I know, it's a huge surprise, right? But the whole reason he wanted Conan to steal these pendants is because he belongs to a secret cabal of wizards that are actually rivals of Aminar the Necromancer, our main villain. And they want Conan to steal these pendants for them because one of the pendants has Aminar's soul in them. I don't know why Aminar put his soul in the pendant. I don't know why the king of Zamora has it now, but that's just how it is. One of these pendants has his soul in it, and until it's destroyed, he can never die. He is virtually immortal until someone destroys the pendant that has his soul in it. And so that character really only exists, that mysterious wizard's character really only exists to give Conan this job that gets the whole ball rolling. And then he shows up at the end, kind of out of nowhere, as Conan is facing off against Aminar in this final battle. And he just kind of shows up and goes, "Hey Conan, that necklace has Aminar's soul in it. You need to destroy it in order to kill him." And then he just gets eaten by this giant snake demon that Aminar summoned. And that's the end of him. That is the end of his storyline. It doesn't go anywhere else. There's another character who is a captain in the military of Zamora. He's a Zamoran captain, and he's given this job by the king of Zamora to track down the kidnappers who have stolen his treasure and his dancing girls. He wants him to lead this army out into the desert to go get them back. And we spend quite a bit of time with this Zamoran captain and his troops, and we get to know them a little, but his storyline really doesn't go anywhere either, because he eventually makes it to Aminar's castle with all the other characters, and he gets captured. A bunch of his men get killed by Aminar's goons, and he gets captured and thrown in a dungeon with Conan. And when Conan inevitably escapes his dungeon, he breaks this guy out as well. But that's kind of all that happens. We see him later at the end, and it's implied that he and his surviving men rose up and fought back against Aminar's henchmen and won their freedom that way. But yeah, his character's arc doesn't really go anywhere else. We don't get any resolution with him and the King of Zamora or anything like that. So I thought that was a little bit tacked on as well. But by far, the worst character, the most useless and insufferable character in this whole book is by far Carla the Red Hawk, the legendary swordswoman, the legendary bandit leader and terror of the desert. She made me want to tear pages out of this book. For those of you who have seen our Eves review of the Deathworld trilogy, Carla is Jason Denault levels of insufferable. I hate this character. When we first meet Carla, she is posing as a fortune teller. We find out that when she and her bandits aren't raiding merchant caravans, they lay low in the city, and she poses as a fortune teller to make some scratch on the side. So that's where we see her in the beginning of the book. She's actually in this tavern with Conan when he meets the wizard who gives him this job. So she's posing as a fortune teller. She's with a client, and the client starts getting a little too handsy with her. And so Conan, being this noble savage with a sense of chivalry, he tells the guy to knock it off, and the guy doesn't take well to that, so they start this fight, and Conan ends up killing this guy and some of his friends. He just leaves their bodies lying on the floor, and he gives the innkeeper the old Han Solo, hey, sorry for the mess, and gives him some coins. But when he turns around, Carla is gone. She's totally left without a word, and Conan's just like, huh, that's weird. I saved her life. She didn't even say thank you. Some gratitude. But he kind of goes on his way. And later in the story, where he's traveling through the desert, tracking down these kidnappers, he stops at a well to get a drink. And he notices that there are these other guys, these slave drivers, who have also stopped to get a drink at this well. And lo and behold, they have a slave with them. And it's Carla. He immediately recognizes her. And so he tries to free her. He cuts her bonds, and he fights these 3 slave drivers, kills them all in like an instant. Like, it's no sweat for Conan. He's just bam, bam, bam. They're all dead. And so he cuts her bonds, sets her free, and she immediately attacks him. She picks up one of the dead slave driver's swords, and she goes after Conan and tries to kill him. And he's just like, what is going on? I've saved your life twice now, and you're trying to kill me. And during their scuffle, she actually trips and falls down the well, and Conan's quick enough to grab her by her ankle, so she's just kind of dangling down this well from Conan's grip. And he's like, okay, I'm going to pull you up, but you got to promise not to attack me again. And so she says she won't. And so he pulls her up, and then something really weird happens. They just start doing the do in the middle of the desert, right next to this well, out of nowhere.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
So yeah, it's kind of confusing. Conan, he kind of forces himself on her, but she's okay with it, I guess. And so it's this really awkward scene. But when it's over, Conan, he puts his stuff back on, he gets on his horse, he's like, hey, thanks for the quickie. I got to head off into the desert because I'm tracking these kidnappers. And she's like, oh, kidnappers? I can help you find them. And in this weird moment where it was really the only time where Conan kind of acted out of character, he just goes along and he follows her into the desert. And she leads him to her bandit camp. And she rouses all the bandits, and they all attack him. So she breaks her promise. They all try to kill him. They pin him down with ropes. And during that night, Conan is able to slip his bonds. And unfortunately, he wakes up the bandits, and so they surround him again. But at this point, he goes, look, guys, I'm chasing after this awesome treasure. And if I get it and bring it back to the guy who hired me to get it, I will have tons of gold, and I will share it with all of you. And so at that point, Carla and all of her bandits decide to team up with Conan and go to Aminar's castle to rescue the girls and get this treasure back. One of Carla's henchmen is a guy named Hordo, and Hordo is actually pretty cool. He's this sort of old, grizzled veteran bandit. He's got an eye patch, and he and Conan really don't like each other at first, but they slowly start to get along, and they become friends eventually. And he and Conan are talking one night, and Hordo tells Conan about the first time he and the other bandits met Carla. And he tells him that, yeah, she was just wandering alone in the desert, and she was naked, and she had this sword with her for some reason. And the guy who was leading us at the time, he's the greatest swordsman I've ever known. He attacked her, and she killed him instantly. And then a bunch of our other swordsmen attacked her, and she killed them all instantly. It was amazing. She's the greatest fighter I've ever known. And the only thing I could think about while I was reading that scene was that other scene at the well where Carla was captured by some slave drivers. And so this legendary swordswoman, the greatest fighter that Hordo has ever known apparently, got taken down by a bunch of jobbers that Conan killed in like 5 seconds. Somehow, I don't believe your story, Hordo. But to make matters more confusing, Carla just kind of out of nowhere decides that she's in love with Conan, I guess, because she invites him into her tent and tries to seduce him. Actually, she succeeds in seducing him, but she tells him, yeah, Conan, I want you because you're like a lone wolf. You're wild and free. And all my men, they're a bunch of dogs. They just do what I say. They're subservient. But you're wild and free, and so I want you. And I'm like, lady, you tried to kill this guy, like, not even 24 hours ago. Make up your mind. And later, throughout the rest of the story, it gets worse because Conan keeps getting into these situations, or the group keeps getting into these situations that Conan comes up with some pretty good ideas to get out of. And she, at every turn, she just stops him and is like, no, Conan, I'm the leader of this group. You do what I say. Even though she told him that she likes him because he's wild and free and doesn't listen to orders, I don't know. It's so confusing. And then, towards the very end of the story, they make it to Aminar's castle. They make it to the necromancer's castle. And Aminar is this very oily, silver-tongued kind of wizard character who tries to win the bandits over to his side. And Conan's having none of this, because as we know, Conan hates magic. He hates wizards. And so he tells Carla, look, this is bad news. This guy, he's obviously hiding ulterior motives. We should not trust him. And Carla's just like, you know what, Conan? I'm going to become friends with this wizard. I'm going to walk right into his castle. I'm going to sit down at his dinner table. And I'm going to drink this big goblet of wine that totally isn't drugged with anything. Okay, there's no drugs in the wine, but she doesn't know that, is what I'm saying. So at this point, I'm just had it up to here with this character. I hate her so much. I want her to die. I can say that about a fictional character. I can want them to die and not feel like a bad person because they're not real. I want this character to die by the end of the story so bad. And that's not what happens to her. What does happen to her at the very end was even more confusing because in the very last chapter, Conan is riding off into the sunset, and he passes a slave caravan, another slave caravan. And of course, one of the slaves is our old friend Carla. And this woman has the gall, the audacity. Not only did she get captured again, she has the audacity to demand that Conan pay to set her free. She doesn't beg, she doesn't ask nicely, she doesn't tell Conan, hey, kill this guy and cut my bonds and set me free like you did before. She demands, vindictively demands, that he pay his hard-earned gold to set her free. And then Conan just kind of looks at her and goes, nope.
You're a smart man.
And then he just rides away. He just ignores her cries and walks away. Oh, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about that ending. I don't know what Robert Jordan was going for. I don't know if he wanted us to think it was funny. I don't know if he wanted it to feel like she was getting her just desserts. Something tells me that Robert Jordan wanted to write this really cool, sort of awesome warrior woman character, and yet he ended up making her really annoying. And at some point, either he or more likely his editor realized that, hey, this character is really kind of obnoxious. You need to end her story in a way that the characters feel like they didn't waste their time reading about her. And so he didn't want to kill her, and he didn't want to write her out of the story. So he had her just get captured by slavers again, and then Conan ignores her and rides off into the distance. Yeah, it's a unique ending, I'll give you that much. So yeah, at the end of the day, even though I did have some minor problems with the character arcs, and there was one character in particular that made me want to tear the hair out of my head, what precious little of it I have left, I did still really enjoy Conan the Invincible by Robert Jordan. It was probably the best Conan pastiche that I've read so far. If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd probably give it 3 screaming Arnolds out of 5. That's how I'm going to rate these Conan books from now on. 1 to 5 screaming Arnolds. That's a good idea. But anyway, guys, that's enough for me. Please let me know in the comments, have you read Conan the Invincible? What did you think of it? What do you think of Robert Jordan's writing style? What do you think of Conan pastiche in general? How are you spending your Cimmerian September? Until next time, guys, as always, farewell and keep reading.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?